Hi everybody and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the functions of the Congress as well as the special responsibilities of the House of Representatives and the Senate. As you may or may not know, Congress is the legislative branch of our government. There's two other branches as well, the judicial branch, which is the courts, and the executive branch, which is the president, and there's more to it than that, as you've probably learned. So within the legislative branch of the Congress, there are three overall functions, and the first one has to do with that word legislate. To legislate means to create laws, and so the first function of Congress is to make laws. In a 2-year term of Congress, you can expect about 700 bills to eventually pass and become law. It totally depends on the term of Congress and maybe if the Congress is of the same party as the president and things like that. But 700 bills out of maybe approximately 25,000 bills that are introduced in Congress. So the chances of a bill becoming a law are not really all that great, but 700 bills is still a lot that do become law. Another lawmaking power that the Congress has is to change the Constitution, which is the highest law in our country. And changing the Constitution is called amending it. Amendments are pretty hard to get passed because you need 2/3 of Congress to vote in favor of an amendment, and then it goes to states. And 38 out of the 50 states also have to agree before the Constitution will actually be amended. So that sums up the lawmaking function of Congress, but the second function of Congress is investigation and research. When Congress meets, they don't always meet in the big chamber together. They're often meeting in smaller committees. We'll talk about the committee system more at another time, but the committee system allows for individual groups of Congress people to investigate and do research and to be well informed before they make a law. So they might have a committee that's designed to deal with healthcare legislation. And in the hearings and in the research they do, they're trying to find out more about healthcare and inviting doctors and other healthcare professionals in order to get good information so that they can make good laws that address some of the issues in healthcare. There are hearings for all major legislation where people can speak for and against, and Congress can be informed before they propose bills to be introduced on the floor and possibly become law. These committees also can act as an oversight over the other two branches of the government, act as oversight over the president, perhaps approving presidential appointments and things like that, and sometimes even acting as a check in terms of impeachment, for example. The third function of Congress is to represent constituents. Constituents is a funny word, and it basically is referring to us, the people who live in the area these Congress people are representing. So here in the 3rd District of Michigan, we are the constituents of Justin Amash. We are also the constituents of our 2 senators who represent the state at large, Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters. Congress people are elected ideally to promote our interests as the people. They should listen to us. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that they're a slave to the will of the people, but they should talk to us and listen to us and try to get input from the people living in their districts, hear their stories, and see how they can better represent them in Washington, D.C. They often attend meetings like town hall meetings. They answer letters, or more likely their people do. They might keep us informed with newsletters via email or maybe even Facebook groups and things like that. And they're also a contact person for helping citizens in their district deal with the government. If I'm having trouble navigating the system with a government agency, my congressperson's office can be a really good resource for me to get some of my questions answered and perhaps to have someone advocate for me in some cases. So remember, those senators do represent entire states, so their constituency is very large, whereas House representatives only represent one district and their constituency is going to be much smaller in general. All right, now let's talk about some of the special responsibilities of the House, and then we'll get to the Senate. So there are lots of things that the House does that the Senate does not, but a couple that we'll focus on here is, first of all, dealing with tax legislation. So number 1 is Ways and Means. This is a committee that deals with tax law. This is a special responsibility of the House that the Senate does not really deal with. or at least they don't originate tax legislation. It's always going to start in the House. The second special responsibility of the House is voting to impeach. Now, being impeached does not actually mean being removed from office. The first step in the impeachment process is actually just saying, we think you might be guilty, and therefore we are going to send you to trial. And the trial phase we'll get to in a minute. But the House initially takes a vote to decide whether a president or other government official will be impeached, and therefore go to trial. There are three special responsibilities of the Senate that we're going to be talking about. The first one is to ratify treaties, and that just means that if the president forms a treaty with another country or another leader, it is the Senate that has to vote to approve that, to actually make that treaty go into effect. Secondly, it's the Senate that confirms nominations of the president. We just went through one a couple months ago that was pretty high profile. President Trump nominated Judge Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, and there was quite a lot of controversy about whether or not he should be nominated. He eventually was nominated, but it was the Senate committee first that had to say, okay, we think you are worthy, and then they sent it out to the whole Senate to vote, all 100 members, and if they vote in majority, then that person is approved to be in that position. In addition to judges, this is true of lots of other jobs, but most notably the secretaries of the departments, the cabinet members, are very high-profile people who have to be approved of by the Senate. And the last special responsibility of the Senate is the trial phase of the impeachment process. And this is now where the Senate actually decides, after interviewing people and having hearings, whether or not the president or other government official should be removed from office. So for example, Bill Clinton was impeached, but he was not removed from office. The House did vote in favor of him going to trial, but the Senate did not decide he was guilty enough, at least, to be removed from office. So those are some of the special responsibilities of the House and the Senate. We'll be going on from there to learn about the committee system, to learn about leadership in Congress, so stay tuned.